Recently, the Supreme Court denied review to both rifle and magazine ban challenges, but now one of the cases where they prior GVR that challenge and said that they would be watching very closely, that case has now jumped up in importance. In this challenge, the Trump DOJ just stated expressly that they believe magazine and rifle bans do in fact violate the Second Amendment, and now this case is heading for oral arguments in just a couple weeks. So let's break down what is happening in this critical case. Now, before we jump into this video, I want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is First Form. You guys know that First Form is an amazing company. They're pro-freedom, pro-America. They support the Second Amendment and what we talk about here on the channel. And one of the really cool things about them is their culture is unmatched. It bleeds into everything that they do, including, what they support and also what they do with their product lines. I really enjoy their protein powder and their pre-workout. I highly recommend it. And so if you guys want to support me and the channel, and you also want to support a pro-freedom company and a company that believes in the Second Amendment, check them out using the links down below in the detail section, also in the pinned comment. And if you order something $100 or more, you can get free shipping. And also they have a money back guarantee. So if you don't absolutely love what you order, you can get your money back. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, I'm going to be discussing two critical cases which challenge a state's ban on rifles and magazines. This is a consolidated challenge that has now made its way to the Third Circuit en banc panel. And the magazine portion of this case was recently granted, vacated, and remanded back down to the lower court for a new decision in light of what the Supreme Court said in their 6-3 ruling in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. Well, that district court recently issued a ruling in two consolidated cases, A&J RPC versus Platkin, and then also Cheeseman versus Platkin. And in that ruling, the court came to one of the more perplexing Second Amendment analysis and rulings that I've really seen in a long time. The court found in that decision that a state's ban on Colt AR-15s is unconstitutional and must be struck down. However, it then decided to not rule on other aspects of the rifle bans that were put in place in the state. And at the same time, they found that magazines that hold more than 10 rounds are arms, but they could in fact be restricted by a state or outright banned. This horrible ruling is now heading for en banc panel review in the Third Circuit in just a couple weeks on October 15th. And now this case has also gained Trump DOJ support. And the Trump DOJ is arguing that state rifle bans and magazine bans like this one in the state of New Jersey need to be struck down. Recently, we actually got a surprise update in this case where the Third Circuit en banc panel on their own decided to take review of this case from the 3-judge panel that had already heard oral arguments on this. So essentially, the en banc panel said, although you've heard oral arguments on this case, we're going to take this on our own and issue our own ruling. That then led the Trump DOJ to jump into this challenge. The Trump DOJ recently filed an amicus brief to the court arguing that magazine and rifle bans are a violation of the Second Amendment. This was a big move by the administration, and it's great to see in this case as it moves forward for oral arguments on October 15th. And there's also a high likelihood that maybe the Trump DOJ would also try to participate in those oral arguments on October 15th. Now, for those not aware, this case involves the state of New Jersey's ban on so-called assault weapons and their magazine restrictions as well. When it comes to magazines and the bans there in the state, essentially back in 2018, New Jersey passed Assembly Bill 2761, banning the possession of firearms magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. This case initially was reviewed and made its way to the Supreme Court back in 2022, but was then later remanded back down to the district court after the Supreme Court issued their Bruin ruling. The district court at that time then consolidated multiple cases, deciding to rule on the state's magazine ban and rifle ban at the same time. In that ruling, the district court showed how it was not going to faithfully apply Bruin in that holding because the judge believed that the Supreme Court got the analysis wrong in Bruin, and the court here just simply did not agree with it. In that ruling by the district court, the judge stated that it's hard to accept the Supreme Court's pronouncements that certain firearms policy choices are off the table when frequently radical individuals possess and use the same firearms for evil purposes. But despite that, the court still said that it had to follow Bruin in some ways. So then it issued kind of this hodgepodge ruling where it said that it was following Bruin, but then came to this mixed decision saying that only AR-15s and their bans are unconstitutional, but it did not address any of the other rifle bans. And then also said that magazines are protected arms, but a state could outright restrict them because of the technological developments and the whole nuanced approach, and it being in the public's best interest to restrict access to those magazines. But this horrible ruling is now being appealed to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and the case was originally argued on July 1st in front of a 3-judge panel in the Third Circuit, and they were set to rule in this case. However, all of that has now changed. Essentially, before the 3-judge panel could issue that ruling on the case, the en banc panel in the Third Circuit on their own decided to issue a notice that they are going to grant review to this case. They're going to sua sponte, take review of this case, and issue their own determination. And now it seems like the state of New Jersey senses that there could be some trouble. They recently submitted a supplemental brief to the en banc panel, arguing that they should actually follow what the Second Circuit recently ruled in a different case dealing with rifles and magazines. The supplemental notice of the state of New Jersey states that the state writes regarding NAGR versus Remand, which rejects Second Amendment challenges to restrictions on rifles and magazines. So New Jersey is now scrambling to support their state bans in light of the en banc panel taking this case on their own. But things got essentially even worse for them because now Harmeet Dillon, on behalf of the Trump administration, filed an amicus brief in support of striking down these bans. In that brief filed by the Trump DOJ, they argue that the Second Amendment guarantees the right of the people to keep and bear arms. The United States understands it to be undisputed in this case that AR-15s qualify as arms, and that is for good reason. The Supreme Court has recognized that at the founding, all firearms constituted arms. They state that this amicus brief addresses two principles of Second Amendment doctrine that have confused other courts. First, the Second Amendment does not secure the right to possess and carry arms only for self-defense or for sporting-related purposes, but rather for all traditionally lawful purposes. History and tradition confirm that these purposes include the common defense. Second, the Second Amendment protects arms that are in common use among law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. To be sure, some other courts have criticized this common use test, but the Supreme Court cases clearly show that it is the governing test for courts determining which arms the Second Amendment protects. Not only that, but the common use test has deep roots in both English and American law. The Second Amendment's irreducible minimum guarantee incorporates both principles. Legislators may not completely ban arms that are in common use among law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes without running afoul of the Constitution. Applying these principles to the state law at issue here, New Jersey's complete bans on possessing rifles such as AR-15s and magazines with the capacity to hold more than 10 rounds violates the Second Amendment. They go on to conclude that the court must make clear that the Second Amendment does not allow New Jersey to ban the most popular rifle in America, the AR-15, nor does it allow New Jersey to ban more than 10-round magazines, which are significantly more popular than AR-15s themselves. So the Trump DOJ argues that an outright ban on rifles and magazines is in fact unconstitutional. This will now be argued in front of the en banc panel in Third Circuit in just a couple weeks on October 15th. So really soon, the Third Circuit en banc panel is going to hear arguments in this case. We're going to be watching closely to see, how does this play out during those arguments. The Third Circuit has issued some pro 2A decisions lately, so this could be another case that comes out in a positive way on the pro 2A side, but we're going to have to see how those arguments develop and essentially how does the en banc panel, what is their demeanor, what questions do they ask, which hypotheticals do they ask, and then also I think it's interesting to see maybe within the next week or so, does the Trump DOJ push to actually join into those oral arguments? We've seen recently that Harmeet Dillon and the Trump administration have taken an active role in a lot of 2A cases, and recently she actually joined the oral arguments in the Illinois PICA challenge in the 7th Circuit, also dealing with rifle bans and magazine bans in the state of Illinois. This would be another big oral argument in front of the Third Circuit en banc panel, so a little bit more significant in its relevance than the Illinois case, because again, this is at a higher level. This is at the en banc panel level in the Third Circuit, and really just one step away from Supreme Court review. So now we're going to be waiting to see if the Trump DOJ tries to get involved in those oral arguments that are going to happen in just a couple weeks. And then we're going to be waiting to see, what happens during those oral arguments on October 15th. Again, we're going to be watching this closely to see how this develops. As we get more information, as it develops more, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to subscribe to the channel. Also, you can check out my website, armedscholar.com. Over there, we have a lot for you guys. But as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.